The day the Zalthorians landed was unlike any other. Under the clear blue sky of a warm spring afternoon, their sleek silver spacecraft touched down gently in the middle of Central Park, New York City. Crowds gathered behind barricades, their faces a mix of awe and apprehension, as government officials and military personnel quickly secured the area. Captain Jack Martin, appointed as the human liaison, approached the spacecraft with a mix of official duty and personal curiosity. His heart raced as the ship's ramp lowered with a hiss, revealing the Zalthorian delegation led by their leader, Creel. "Welcome to Earth," Jack said, extending his hand in a gesture of peace. Creel, a tall, slender figure with translucent skin, mimicked the gesture. "We come in peace, Captain Martin. We are explorers, eager to learn about your world." Jack smiled, relieved by the peaceful intentions. "We have much to share with each other. Shall we begin our exchange?" As the two leaders walked towards the prepared conference area, surrounded by media and security, Jack initiated a conversation about Earth's diverse cultures and histories. Creel listened intently, his bright, unblinking eyes absorbing every word. "It is fascinating," Creel responded. "On Zalthor, we cherish knowledge above all. Your history is rich and varied. But tell me, Captain, what are these legends of the Grim Reapers I've read in your data files? Such a figure sounds formidable." Jack chuckled, realizing the cultural significance might not translate well. "Ah, the Grim Reaper is more of a myth or a personification of death in many of our cultures. He's not real, just a character in stories used to explain the natural process of life and death." Creel tilted his head, intrigued. "A personification of death? Interesting. And this Reaper, he harvests souls?" "Well, yes, according to the stories. He carries a large scythe and wears a dark robe, appearing at the time of death. But it's symbolic, really, a way to cope with the concept of mortality." Creel nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Fascinating. We have nothing like this in Zalthorian culture. Death for us is merely a cessation of life, not something personified." Jack sensed a hint of unease in Creel's voice. "It's just folklore, Creel. Every culture has its tales. Shall we continue to the conference? We can discuss more about our scientific achievements." "Of course, Captain Martin," Creel agreed, but the sparkle of curiosity, and perhaps concern, remained in his eyes. As they entered the conference area, Jack introduced Creel to other key figures in diplomacy and science, including Dr. Emily Harris, an expert in human cultural studies, and General Carter, overseeing security. Creel greeted each with polite curiosity but seemed preoccupied. Jack noticed this and made a mental note to clarify any misinterpretations later. The initial meeting involved a formal exchange of greetings and gifts, symbolizing goodwill and a willingness to learn from each other. However, as the day progressed, Jack couldn't shake off the feeling that Creel was particularly stuck on the concept of the Grim Reaper. It seemed such an odd thing to fixate on, especially with so many other aspects of human culture to absorb. Little did Jack know, this innocent misunderstanding would soon escalate into a situation far beyond what he had anticipated, challenging him to bridge a cultural divide deeper than the vastness of space between Earth and Zalthor. Later that evening, in the serene setting of a United Nations lounge designed for informal dialogues, Jack and Creel sat with a few other delegates to delve deeper into cultural exchanges. The room buzzed with low conversations, illuminated by the soft glow of ambient lights. Despite the relaxed atmosphere, Creel's demeanor had shifted. The Zalthorian leader appeared more contemplative, almost concerned. "Captain Martin, may we revisit our earlier discussion about this Grim Reaper?" Creel asked, his voice carrying a weight of seriousness that drew Jack's full attention. "Of course, Creel," Jack replied, sensing the urgency in Creel's tone. "What about it intrigues you?" Creel leaned forward, his eyes reflecting a mix of fascination and apprehension. In Zalthorian culture, death is straightforward, devoid of mysticism. The idea that an entity exists to collect souls is quite unsettling. How do your people view this figure? As a terror, a comfort? Jack pondered the question, aware of the cultural sensitivity needed. It varies. Some see the Reaper as a gentle guide to the afterlife, while others might view him as a sinister figure. But it's important to understand, he's not real. He's a metaphorical figure used to help people cope with the idea of death. Around them, other human delegates shared tales of their cultural mythologies with Zalthorian counterparts, each story echoing themes of life, death, and beyond, weaving a tapestry of Earth's rich folklore. Dr. Emily Harris, who had joined the conversation, added, "Think of him as a character in a story, much like the characters in Zalthorian folklore that symbolize your values or historical events. Creel nodded, slowly absorbing the explanations. I see. It's just that such a character would be perceived very differently in our society. To personify death in such a vivid manner might cause distress or even fear among my people. Jack smiled reassuringly. I understand, Creel, but let me assure you the Grim Reaper is nothing more than a story. He's not a threat to anyone, human or Zalthorian. Creel seemed somewhat reassured, but as the meeting drew to a close, he quietly requested copies of human literature on these myths for further study. Jack obliged, providing digital archives of various cultural texts and myths, hoping to foster understanding and perhaps ease any lingering concerns Creel might have. After the meeting, Creel retired to his quarters, deep in thought. He accessed the digital archives Jack had provided and began reading through the various stories of the Grim Reaper. Each story seemed to deepen his fascination and, unintentionally, his unease. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Jack, Creel sent a cautious message to his home planet, detailing his findings about Earth's cultural personification of death. This message, intended for the Zalthorian High Council, was intercepted by curious and somewhat anxious advisors. The concept of the Grim Reaper was alien and disturbing to them, ripe for misinterpretation. As the Zalthorian advisors discussed the message, their unease grew. The idea of an entity that harvested souls sparked fears of a supernatural threat, one that they were ill-prepared to understand or confront. Rumors began to spread among the Zalthorian populace, fueled by snippets of overheard conversations and incomplete understandings of Earth's mythologies. Back on Earth, as Jack prepared for the next day's sessions, hoping to delve into technological and scientific exchanges, he remained unaware of the growing concern among the Zalthorians. His intention to clarify and demystify had inadvertently planted a seed of cosmic anxiety, one that would soon require more than just diplomatic reassurances to contain. As the sun rose over Earth, casting its light on another day of diplomatic exchanges, the situation across the galaxy was less serene. The Zalthorian home planet, Zalthor Prime, buzzed with concern over the alarming dispatches received from Creel regarding the Grim Reaper. The misinterpretation of this mythical figure as a potential existential threat had rapidly percolated through various channels of Zalthorian society. In the Grand Hall of the Zalthorian High Council, advisors gathered around a large oval table, their expressions fraught with worry. Councillor Vale, a senior advisor known for his prudent nature, addressed the assembly with a grave tone. This Grim Reaper, as described by Creel, could be a clandestine weapon or a harbinger of some darker aspect of human civilization. We must consider the implications for our people's safety. Another councillor, Miren, chimed in, her voice tinged with skepticism. Could we be misinterpreting these human myths? After all, our understanding of their language and culture is still nascent. Vael shook his head, his antennae twitching with anxiety. There is too much at stake to dismiss this lightly. I propose we put defensive measures in place and monitor human activities more closely. It may also be prudent to prepare our people for a potential encounter with this entity. The council agreed, and soon, educational broadcasts were sent across Zalthor Prime, cautioning citizens about the Grim Reaper, albeit in vague terms to prevent outright panic. The broadcasts, however, had the opposite effect, igniting a wave of fear and speculation among the populace. Back on Earth, Jack and Creel continued their discussions, oblivious to the unfolding events. During a session on interstellar navigation technologies, Creel received a discreet communication from Zalthor Prime. Reading the message, his already pale complexion seemed to drain of color. Jack noticed Creel's distress immediately. Creel, is everything all right? You seem troubled. Creel hesitated, then decided to share his concerns. Captain Martin, the concept of the Grim Reaper has caused a significant stir among my people. The Council fears that it might represent a threat we are not equipped to understand or counter. Jack was taken aback, a mix of confusion and concern crossing his face. Creel, I assure you, it's just a myth. There is no danger from such a figure. Creel nodded slowly, the tension evident in his posture. Perhaps another detailed explanation could help. Would you be willing to address our High Council via a communication link? It might ease their concerns to hear it directly from you. Jack agreed without hesitation. Of course, Creel. I'd be happy to help clarify any misunderstandings. Later that day, Jack stood before a communication console, broadcasting live to the Zalthorian High Council. He explained in detail the cultural significance of the Grim Reaper, emphasizing its metaphorical role in human society. The Grim Reaper is not a being or a threat. It is a symbolic figure used to represent the concept of mortality and the natural cycle of life and death. Despite Jack's reassurances, the seed of fear had already been sown among the Zalthorians. The counselors expressed their gratitude for the clarification, but requested continued updates on human cultural practices, still wary of potential hidden meanings. As the transmission ended, Creel thanked Jack for his efforts. "I hope your words will calm the storm," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Jack nodded, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. He hadn't anticipated that a simple cultural exchange could spiral into an interstellar diplomatic crisis. Now, he faced the task of not only bridging gaps in understanding, but also quelling an unfounded fear that threatened to fracture the fragile rapport between humanity and the Zalthorians. As news of the Grim Reaper threat circulated throughout Zalthor Prime, it didn't take long for other interstellar communities to catch wind of the perceived danger. Among them were the Vrox, a militaristic species with a history of exploiting vulnerabilities in their neighboring systems. The leaders of the Vrox saw an opportunity in the Zalthorians' fear. Commander Vorx, a high-ranking Vrox strategist, convened a clandestine meeting with his fleet commanders. The dimly lit room buzzed with anticipation as Vorx outlined his plan, his voice a low growl. "The Zalthorians are distracted and fearful of a human myth. This confusion is our opening. We will escalate their fear to chaos. We shall craft our ships and drones to resemble this human Grim Reaper, complete with dark, skeletal designs. We will strike at the outer Zalthorian colonies, masquerading as the incarnation of their fear," Vorx continued, unveiling models of the modified ships designed to invoke the eerie image of the Grim Reaper. Back on Earth, Captain Jack Martin remained in close contact with Creel, attempting to further the cultural understanding between their peoples. However, the Zalthorians grew increasingly preoccupied with defense strategies against the mythical threat, their attention diverted from the peaceful exchange they had initially sought with humanity. Creel, now under immense pressure from his council and populace, communicated his people's growing unease to Jack. "Captain Martin, my people are thankful for your reassurances, but the fear has taken root. We are fortifying our defenses and keeping a vigilant watch." Jack, troubled by the unfolding situation, convened with his team, including Dr. Emily Harris and General Carter. "We need to find a way to demonstrate that this Grim Reaper is nothing but a myth. If the Zalthorians continue down this path, they might provoke an unnecessary conflict, or worse, make themselves vulnerable to real threats," Jack stated. Emily suggested, "Perhaps we could organize a cultural symposium, inviting leaders from various alien civilizations to Earth. We can use this platform to dispel myths and share true cultural meanings directly." Meanwhile, the Vrox launched their first disguised attack. The skeletal dark ships descended upon a remote Zalthorian agricultural colony. As they had anticipated, the appearance of the ships sent waves of terror through the colony. The Zalthorians, convinced that they were under attack by the Grim Reaper himself, sent out distress signals across their empire. The news of the attack caused widespread panic on Zalthor Prime. Creel immediately contacted Jack, his voice tense. "Captain, we have been attacked by what appears to be your Grim Reaper. The descriptions match the myth precisely. How do you explain this?" Jack, stunned and confused, responded, "Creel, that's impossible. It must be a misunderstanding or someone is manipulating the myth to incite fear. Give us time to investigate this." Determined to uncover the truth and prevent an escalation, Jack coordinated with Earth's space monitoring systems to track any unusual spacecraft activity in Zalthorian territories. At the same time, he pushed forward with plans for the cultural symposium, hoping it could serve as a counterbalance to the spreading fear and confusion. The stakes were high, and time was running out. Jack needed to expose the Vrox's deception before the Zalthorians, driven by fear, took drastic actions that could ignite a war based on shadows and myths. With the situation escalating rapidly, Captain Jack Martin escalated his plans for the cultural symposium. He hoped it would not only clear up the misunderstandings about the Grim Reaper, but also uncover any manipulations by other alien races. Meanwhile, he worked tirelessly to investigate the recent attacks on Zalthorian colonies. General Carter and Dr. Emily Harris assisted Jack in setting up the symposium, inviting delegates from multiple interstellar communities, including the Zalthorians, and representatives from neutral planets that could mediate discussions. The event was to be held at the United Nations, transformed into a hub of intergalactic diplomacy. In parallel, Jack coordinated with Earth's space monitoring systems, using their advanced satellite technology to track the mysterious Grim Reaper ships. After several tense days of surveillance, they captured images of the ships attacking another Zalthorian outpost. The ships bore no markings of any known civilization, especially not human. Look at the design. It's theatrical, menacing. It's meant to incite fear rather than practical combat, Jack pointed out during a briefing with his team. That's consistent with psychological warfare, not an actual entity, Emily added, analyzing the images. Someone is exploiting the Zalthorian fears intentionally. Jack nodded, his suspicions growing. We need to find out who's behind this. General, can we enhance the surveillance on these coordinates? If these ships show up again, I want to track them back to their origin. General Carter agreed, setting his team to work on enhancing their tracking capabilities. Meanwhile, the symposium began, with delegates from across the galaxy gathering in a grand auditorium, buzzing with varied languages and adorned with symbols of peace from numerous worlds. Creel arrived, visibly stressed but hopeful that the symposium would bring clarity. Jack greeted him warmly, ensuring the Zalthorian leader that they were close to uncovering the truth behind the attacks. As the symposium progressed, experts in xenocultural relations took the stage, sharing insights into the symbolism of death across different cultures, highlighting the non-literal nature of many such myths. When it was Jack's turn, he spoke passionately about Earth's myths, including the Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper symbolizes a natural part of life, death, in our culture. It's not a being to fear, but a concept to help us cope with loss and mortality. What has been described in your attacks does not represent our values or our teachings. The audience listened intently, many nodding in understanding. However, the breakthrough came when one of the surveillance technicians rushed in with urgent news for Jack. Captain, we've tracked the ships. They're returning to a sector controlled by the Vrox. Jack seized the moment, addressing the assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just obtained proof that the attacks have been orchestrated to look like the mythical Grim Reaper by forces from the Vrox sector. This is not a supernatural threat, but a calculated attempt to manipulate and spread fear among us. The revelation caused a stir among the delegates, with many turning to view the proof that Jack's team displayed on the screens around the hall. Creel, relieved but shocked, thanked Jack for his dedication to truth and peace. With the real threat exposed, the symposium shifted focus, discussing ways to combat misinformation and fear-mongering in the galaxy. Jack's initiative had not only averted a potential war, but also strengthened Earth's position as a mediator and peacemaker among the stars. With the Vrox's deceptive tactics exposed, the atmosphere at the symposium shifted palpably. Jack Martin, supported by his team and new data, found himself at the center of intense interstellar discussions. The assembly was a mixture of outrage and relief, but all were united by a renewed determination to uphold truth and peace across civilizations. Creel, visibly reassured by the revelations, approached Jack with a mixture of gratitude and concern. Captain Martin, your commitment to uncovering the truth has prevented a grievous misjudgment on our part. We are in your debt. How can we assist in ensuring such manipulations do not occur again? Jack nodded, appreciating Creel's offer. Thank you, Creel. Going forward, we need a robust system to verify threats and communicate more transparently across species and borders. We must build a coalition dedicated to the prevention of misinformation and fear-driven policies. The proposal resonated with the delegates, leading to the formation of an Interstellar Truth and Transparency Committee, ITTC. Jack was elected as the inaugural chair, a role that would leverage his diplomatic skills and commitment to peace. Meanwhile, General Carter initiated a covert operation to trace the Vrox ships back to their origin and gather more evidence of their involvement in the staged attacks. The operation, carried out by a mixed team of human and allied alien forces, led them deep into a sector known for its lawlessness, where the Vrox had established a hidden base. As they approached the base, the team prepared for a potential confrontation. The Vrox, known for their aggressive tactics, would not take kindly to being tracked. However, the element of surprise was on their side. The team infiltrated the base successfully, capturing critical data and even a few Vrox commanders in the process. Interrogations revealed that the Vrox leadership had planned the fake Grim Reaper attacks as a means to destabilize regions and expand their control under the guise of providing protection against mythical threats. With solid evidence in hand, Jack convened an emergency session of the ITTC, presenting the findings to the interstellar community. The evidence was irrefutable, and the Vrox's actions were condemned universally. Sanctions were proposed against them, and protective measures were put in place to shield vulnerable civilizations from similar tactics. The council session, held on Earth, was broadcast across multiple planets, showing the united front of the ITTC and their commitment to safeguarding the galaxy from deception and manipulation. As the session concluded, Jack and Creel had a private conversation, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. Creel expressed his people's shift in perspective. "Captain, this incident has taught us much about fear and the shadows it can cast. We must strive to illuminate our paths with truth and cooperation." Jack agreed, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment and responsibility. "Indeed, Creel. Let's ensure this coalition stands as a beacon to those who seek to manipulate and divide. Together, we are stronger and wiser." With the crisis averted and new protective measures in place, the galaxy looked toward a more secure future. The ITTC, under Jack's leadership, continued to grow, drawing in more civilizations eager to participate in this new era of transparency and cooperation. Back on Earth, Jack's role as a peacemaker was celebrated. He had not only prevented a potentially catastrophic war, but also established a legacy of diplomacy and truth that would guide future generations. The myth of the Grim Reaper, once a source of misunderstanding and fear, had become a catalyst for unity and the pursuit of peace across the stars. After the formation of the Interstellar Truth and Transparency Committee, ITTC, and the resolution of the crisis sparked by the Vrox's deceit, the galaxies entered a period of newfound stability and cooperation. Jack Martin, as the chair of the ITTC, worked tirelessly to foster an environment of openness among the interstellar communities. On Earth, a grand conference was convened, drawing leaders and delegates from across known space to ratify the Charter of Galactic Cooperation. This landmark document aimed to solidify the principles of truth and mutual respect that the ITTC stood for. Jack stood at the podium, addressing the diverse assembly. "Ladies and gentlemen, beings of all worlds, today marks a historic moment for all our civilizations," Jack began, his voice resonant in the vast hall. "Together we are not just drafting a treaty. We are forging a future where deceit and fear no longer drive us apart, but where transparency brings us closer." Creel, representing the Zalthorians, was among the first to sign the charter. His endorsement was significant, symbolizing a major shift in how his people viewed interstellar relations. "We have learned a hard lesson," Creel admitted in his speech, "that the shadows of ignorance can only be dispelled with the light of understanding. We commit to this new path, alongside our friends and neighbors." As other leaders followed, each signing the charter and sharing words of commitment, a sense of collective purpose filled the room. The media from multiple worlds broadcast the event live, ensuring that every corner of the galaxies understood the significance of what was being achieved. Back on Zalthor Prime, the impact of the ITTC's work and the debunking of the Grim Reaper myth led to a cultural renaissance, sparking interest in other civilizations' myths and realities. This curiosity fostered a broader acceptance of external cultures, which previously might have ignited fear or suspicion. Meanwhile, Jack focused on the next phase of the ITTC's mission: educational programs that would run across member planets, teaching not only about the dangers of misinformation, but also about the importance of cultural empathy. These programs were designed to prevent future conflicts sparked by misunderstandings or fear-mongering. On a more tactical level, the ITTC established a rapid response team, tasked with investigating any signs of subterfuge or manipulation in interstellar communications. This unit, led by General Carter, operated out of a state-of-the-art facility on Earth, equipped with the latest in both human and alien technologies. As the year progressed, the effectiveness of these initiatives became apparent. Incidents of conflict due to misinformation decreased, and disputes were more often resolved through dialogue facilitated by ITTC mediators. One evening, as Jack walked through the gardens of the United Nations, he reflected on the journey from first contact to this new era of peace. The path had been fraught with challenges, but the outcomes spoke volumes about the potential for unity and diversity. "Captain Martin," Creel approached him, his steps silent on the soft earth, "I have been reflecting on our journey. From fear to friendship, it is a testament to what we can accomplish when we choose to understand rather than assume." Jack smiled, clapping Creel on the shoulder. "Well said, Creel. It's about building bridges, sometimes from the most unlikely materials." As they stood looking up at the stars, a sense of accomplishment and hope for the future filled their hearts. The galaxy was vast, and challenges would always be there, but as long as they held on to the principles of the ITTC, they could face them together. This new galactic order was not just about maintaining peace. It was about nurturing a community that thrived on mutual respect and understanding. Several months after the establishment of the Charter of Galactic Cooperation and the effective functioning of the Interstellar Truth and Transparency Committee, ITTC, the galaxy found itself in a period of unprecedented peace and collaboration. Jack Martin, hailed as a pivotal figure in this new era, continued to lead the ITTC with a focus on proactive peace-building and cultural exchange. As Jack prepared for the annual ITTC summit, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The once feared Grim Reaper had transformed from a symbol of death into a catalyst for unity and understanding. This transformation was not just a testament to the power of dialogue, but also a reminder of the responsibilities that came with interstellar leadership. The summit, held on a neutral space station orbiting Earth, was attended by delegates from hundreds of planetary systems. Jack opened the summit with a keynote address, highlighting the year's successes and the challenges ahead. "We've come a long way since the days of fear and misunderstanding," he began, his voice echoing in the vast auditorium. "But our work is far from over. We must remain vigilant against the forces of division and misinformation." Throughout the summit, workshops and panels discussed various aspects of interstellar relations, including the integration of emerging civilizations into the galactic community, the role of technology in maintaining transparency, and the preservation of cultural heritage amidst growing homogeneity. One of the standout sessions was led by Dr. Emily Harris, who had spearheaded a cultural sensitivity program that had become a cornerstone of ITTC's educational outreach. "By understanding each other's myths and legends, we appreciate our commonalities and respect our differences," she explained to a room full of attentive delegates. Meanwhile, Creel shared his experiences from Zalthor Prime, where the debunking of the Grim Reaper myth had led to a broader societal shift. "We used to fear what we didn't understand. Now, we seek to understand what we fear," Creel stated, his message resonating with many in attendance. As the summit concluded, Jack and the other leaders signed several new treaties aimed at enhancing technological sharing and economic collaboration, setting the stage for a future where no civilization would need to fear another unjustly. After the summit, Jack took a quiet moment to gaze out at the stars from the observation deck of the space station. The vastness of space, once a backdrop to conflict and fear, now seemed to promise endless possibilities for discovery and friendship. General Carter joined him, looking equally contemplative. "You think we'll ever get past all the politics and fear, truly make something lasting out here?" he asked. Jack smiled, his eyes not leaving the stars. "We've already started, Carter. Every story shared, every myth debunked, and every hand extended in friendship brings us closer to that reality. The legacy of the Grim Reaper isn't about death, it's about what we do in response to fear. And I think we're on the right path." With the galaxies more interconnected than ever, the work of the ITTC continued to evolve. Jack knew that peace was not merely the absence of war, but the active presence of understanding. As he returned to his duties, he carried with him a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might hold, guided by the principles of truth and cooperation that had brought them all this far. The legacy of the Grim Reaper, once a harbinger of fear, now stood as a beacon of how far-reaching and transformative human courage and curiosity could be. It was a reminder that even the darkest myths could lead to light, and that in the vast expanse of the galaxy, humanity could help lead the way to a brighter, shared future.